Hey class, it's Bill Berry with the last video, I promise. In the Intro to Chapter 3 project on Rihanna's Realty, we talked about, in this video, I talked a couple times about the fact that writing automated or programmatic tests would be really cool in this kind of thing. We talked about how much of a pain it is to run all of these tests manually and type in these values, and then if you get one wrong, you got to type it in again. You want to run the test again, you got to start all over. It's really not the way that you want to do it. You want to write the tests into code so that they're easy to run, and I want to show you a quick way to do that. There's some slicker ways and some frameworks that might help you, but if you wanted to get started with this and see how it works, I want to show you how that might be done. First of all, let's come back down to our test cases. Remember, we had all these test cases figured out. So how can we take this and make it into a programmatic solution? Well, first thing I want to do is I want to change our structure a little bit in order to support testing in a unit test level. What I'd really like to do is have all of the commissions being calculated, the separate pieces being calculated in separate functions. That way we can be super focused on that particular thing, and we can know whether that is doing its job. So I'm going to change things up a little bit, and so this is what I'm just going to fix that up, and then we will talk about how to move forward after that. So you see what I've done here is in main, after doing the inputs, I calculate the commission by calling calculate commission with those three pieces of data, and then I have the commission and I can print it. But calculate commission calls three helper functions, one of which is called base commission, then calculate days on market add, and then the closing add. Each time it passes in the data that is necessary for that particular function, and then it adds them all together. Now notice each one of those does the if logic that we had in the other, but it's focused only on that one piece, and then it does the integering, the truncation, right, of that right before the end and passes it back. And then days on market does that, but then I've added a calculate closing add, and I took the logic of that, the days to closing piece out of here and put it in here again so I can focus just on that. So the logic looks a tiny bit different, but each of these calculates now one of the pieces, and that way I can focus on testing each function at a time, and that's going to be called unit testing, right? That's testing each piece as a unit, not the whole thing necessarily as a whole. So we definitely want to have a way to run all these tests at once. So I'm going to make a function called run tests, and in it I'm going to just print some little messages that are going to let me know that things are running. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to make a message that says, hey, I'm running my tests right now, and then I'm going to start them and I'm going to stop them. Why is that? Well, I want to have some visual indicator of what's going on. I don't want to just see nothing happen. And really what I want to focus on here is cases in which I have a failure. Now, you can make it to where you see both the passes and the fails, but if you're not careful, you'll clutter up the output and make it difficult. The most important thing is that you are super clear on failures. If you see anything fail, it needs to be huge, bold, red, caps, whatever you want to do. So for the most part, I'm actually going to display messages only for failures. And then this way I say, look, testing started, testing stopped. If you see anything between these two lines, you know there's a failure. Otherwise, life is good. Everything ran properly. So that's our first thing. Then what I'm going to do is I want to have a function that's going to focus on each unit. So I want to have a function called run calculate base commission cases, right? This is going to run all of the test cases for the base commission. So what I want to do is to have something that now takes these tests, oops, not what I wanted, that takes these tests, the ones that are focused on the sales price, and I want to encode all of these where I have this sales price coming in and this is what I expect to have coming out. So what I want to do in this case is for each of these I want to run a test. So I'm going to make another function that's going to look similar to this, except it's going to be for a single case. Notice this is plural and this is singular. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in the price and what I have expected to come out of the calculation. And then I can say, look, I'm going to calculate the result, calling calculate base commission using the price, right? That's the only input to the base commission calculation is the home price. So I'm going to pass in the price, and then I'm going to say if the result that came back is not equal to what I expected, right? If the calculated result is not the value that was passed in as an expectation, then I want to print an error message. So I'm going to print something like this. Calc base commission failed for price. I'm going to print the price so I know what price didn't work properly, and then say, hey, look, this is what I expected, and this is what I got. And then this is the result. And then I'm going to put a separator equals blah, 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 so that I can control it better. Now this is a long line, so I can break this up if I want. Let's say I break it up here so you can see it better. All right, I got this expected, and then I got this, there we go. And then I could put the separator on a different line if you think that that will help understand what's going on. So I'm going to print this message and say this is the price it failed, this is what I expected, and this is what I actually got. Therefore, you have all the information in the test case failure to know exactly what went wrong. Here's the number, this is what I expected, but this is what I got. That kind of points you pretty specifically to what might be going wrong. And of course, because it's me, I'm going to want my code to look really slick and nice, so I'm going to line these suckers up as well. There you go. So this is one case, right? This is the code that runs one particular case. And then I can take this table, right? And I can feed in these values and these expectations and pass those in just like this. So I'm going to run all of those tests, and they're going to look like this. Right? So one by one, I'm going to feed. If I pass in a 0, I should get a 0. If I pass in 400,000, I should get 40,000 in commission. And likewise, again, I just took this table and I turned it exactly into test cases. And each one of these is going to run, and if there's a failure, it's going to print. If there's not a failure, it's not going to print. And then I'm going to add this to my list. I'm going to say run calc base commission cases. I should cut and paste that so I don't make any mistakes, right? So now it's super easy for me to go and run those tests. In fact, what I can do is, for the moment, rather than main, I can actually just call, instead of main, why don't I just call run tests down here, right? So instead of calling main, which I would normally do, I'm going to comment that out and just say run tests, right? That way I'm going to go be in test mode instead of in user mode, and I'm not even going to ask any questions, right? So now let's go run and see what happens. F5. Test starting. Any failures noted below, tests have completed. All my tests ran and nothing bad happened. Now, I'm a little suspicious because when I'm in the testing mindset, I'm suspicious that, this is awfully easy, right? It's awfully good that the first time through it happened to work perfectly, but I'm suspicious of that. So I'm going to actually go and make one test fail, right? I'm going to put in that I expect $40,001 because I just want to see that my whole messaging, that I'm calling the functions, that I'm printing the failures properly, etc. And now I run again. And now it says commission failed for price 40 that, expected that, but got that. Aha. Okay, so it did run the test. It did see if something doesn't compare, it does actually do the right thing, which is exactly what I want. So that's fantastic. I can close that and put that back to where I had it. I can maybe go and, I could actually maybe make this indented a little so it falls under the failure line a little bit better, right? At least something like this. But basically, right, so basically I've now I've started to encode my tests into my code, and therefore they're easy to maintain, they're easy to run. Like now, every time I make the tiniest change, right? If I just make a little change to one of the algorithms, I just change the logic a tiny bit, I go and I move things around in a function or move them to a different function, whatever the case, I have no excuse for bypassing my tests because all I have to do is just type in run tests. And in fact, I'm going to leave run tests in here until I'm all done with that testing, and then I'm going to just switch this back and put the call to main back, right? Now the other thing to think about, if I were working on this thing in production code and this was something that was going to go to customers, because if you have Python, you have to ship the source code, right? You can't just compile it into a binary file or an executable file. So you may want to have something that strips these things out, right? That takes out the test code, or you may want to put all of these in a module. Right? You take all your test code and put it in a separate module, and therefore you just don't ship the module, right? You have a call to it in here that's commented out, but the module's simply not there, right? So nobody can actually see your test code, and it doesn't bloat and make it a bigger thing to deliver to customers. They just don't get that part. So you don't want to ship test code typically to customers, but you want to save it around and keep it under your source control and keep it for your testing purposes, because again, it makes it so easy. I would continue now this next thing. I would have another function that would test the second part, which is the days on market, and I'd have another function that does the closing, the days to closing. So each one of those would have an entry here, would have a function written for it, and would have a case written for it. But you see that if you continue down that road, this is how you would do it, and it would all work pretty darn nicely. So keep that in mind, please. If you become a professional programmer, you need to think along exactly these lines. If you go forward and take my class for Java, I really emphasize this, and you'll use a very cool framework that's provided in our Java libraries that will let you make this do this very easily, more easily than writing this code, in fact. So it's good stuff to know about. It's good stuff to keep in mind, and I wanted to introduce it to you here so you have this in your toolbox and in your brain for future use, future reference. Thanks for watching this video. If you did, this is supplemental, but still cool and useful, I think. Let me know what you think in comments, in forums, or in email, and thanks for watching.